My name is 𝗟𝗶H𝗸𝗃𝗀𝗃. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and welcome to my daily LinkedIn Live, where I discuss process and procedures for helping you achieve success in the federal market. I've spent 20 years as a small business owner in the federal market, and since 2018, I've been teaching folks like you that government contracting is not a secret, it's just a process. And the process really is going from point A all the way to point Z. If you know what the steps are in between, then theoretically you can go from point A to point Z, no problem. And so that's what I like to teach you, is the process of government contracting. Today, I'm going to talk to you about federal and commercial. I threw in SLED, state, local, and education in there, but really, commercial and federal, and what are my thoughts on that? In really the catalyst for today's conversation came from somebody who misunderstood my position on it. They thought that I don't believe in commercial. I like commercial. Commercial, you get good rates, you get a lot of money, you can make good profit margins, right? But I have strong opinions about commercial, state and local, or federal, in particular for companies that are under $10 million and are, basically what I consider really early stage small businesses. I don't care how long you've been in business. If you're making less than $10 million, spoiler alert, I believe you should focus to drive better into the customer segment that you're in, or the market you're in. And so I'm going to talk about that today. I'm going to talk about what I believe about the different markets and what I recommend to people when I'm helping them with like a 5-year strategy. Where should I go? And then also I'm going to talk to you about, well, how do you lay out a plan to go after one market or another? And I will tell you this last thing, right, is that, sorry. So remember to set your phones to silent if you're the speaker. Anyways, the last thing I'm going to kind of preface this with is that if you're in the federal market, I believe you should be all in. That's it, no commercial. So with that said, I'm going to show you, well, how do you do commercial business when you're all in on the federal? So I'm going to talk to you about that in a second, because I think that there is a lot of money in the commercial side. What I don't like is a lack of focus. And so I'm going to drive into that first point, right? Is that when you're in the federal market, and by the way, of course, I advocate federal market constantly, right? That's what I'm teaching, is government contracting. In the federal space, I teach sales in the federal space. I could easily pick it up and go straight down to state and local and education, nonprofit, where I've made money before, and I can go right into commercial, where I've made a lot of money. But I am a big advocate of getting you to focus your attention in the federal market if that's where you choose to be. If you choose to be in state and local or in commercial, then by all means go over there. And of course, we're talking here business to business. Whether that business is a government or the business is an actual commercial company, it's still just B2B, right? That's separate from B2C, which is commercial or consumer. So business to consumer, where it's more transactional. Anyways, when you're in the federal space and you try to go commercial and state and local as well, right? When you try to go to all of those, what you're doing is diluting your focus. You no longer are focusing on this market, the federal market. You no longer, even on the commercial side, right? In the commercial side, if you were focused on, let's say, healthcare, and you try to do healthcare and finance, well, if you're a small company, you just don't have the bandwidth, the resources, the people, et cetera, to be able to go after different markets. You don't have the resources to become a trusted thought leader within that market. And that's what you want to do when you're trying to grow your business, especially pre-$10 million. But frankly, I would say this is all the way up into the $50 million range, is that the more you can focus and the better you are at something, the more business you will get because of that. So let's start with marketing material as a quick example of focusing and the ability to use stuff. When you sell to somebody in the federal market, pretty much the marketing material is the same. I might tweak it a little bit and put a ship on something that's going to go to the Navy, or an airplane that's going to the Air Force. But in the federal space, basically my message is the same. Here's my core competencies and here's my past performance. When I go into the commercial side, it's different. I'm trying to tweak my message, not even just to a sector within the commercial side, but sometimes all the way down to that unique customer. And I've heard this message before about tweaking your marketing messages to the customer you're reaching. It's just not scalable. For anybody who's been in a small business and run a small business like I have for 20 years, you know that you just don't have the bandwidth. You can't do it yourself, be everywhere. And you can't put that pressure on a marketing person you might hire and say, hey, I need you to market for the federal space. I need you to market for DOD and civilian side. I need you to also make that marketing good for commercial. Where can they focus? And it's hard for them to get energy. But if they focus really tightly, not just on DOD, but maybe completely in the Navy, well, now all their marketing material has this spin of the Navy. And the Navy is big enough for any one of us to build a $10 million business. And so that's why I use that threshold of if you're over 10, under 10, excuse me. And so the next thing is on salespeople. If you have salespeople, and I learned this lesson in 2009 solidly, right? I used to have this kind of belief, but in 2009, I started working with a teaming partner who had salespeople who would be responsible for a single person for the Air Force, for Department of Education, and for like HHS. I'm like, well, how on earth could that salesperson, that business developer, ever really understand anything about the mission of those organizations, ever really be able to develop relationships within those organizations that would lead to opportunities? They couldn't. Those organizations are just huge, hundreds of billions of dollars in spend, right? And so when you've got an organization that big, you need a person to be able to focus. And the easiest way to see this is go up to a large company, and what do? They don't take a single person and put them on all markets. They say, look, you got Air Force, go get me $1 billion out of the Air Force in new sales or something, right? Whatever it is, they focus down. And so if it's good enough for $1 billion firm, why wouldn't we do it down here? And I'll pause for 1 second and say that the reason people sometimes focus everywhere is they're afraid of missing out on anything. And there's this line about if you chase 2 rabbits, you're not eating dinner tonight. Meaning if you chase after 2 rabbits, they're going to split and go in different directions. And which way do you go, right? You don't know which way to go. By focusing on an agency, you get good at it. As you grow, you can expand the amount of agencies you can reach. You got to hire a whole new business developer and say, focus here. So on commercial side, though, it's different. There's so many different companies, and every company is approached differently. And then the last thing I want to say from a focus standardization, right? This is an introduction to the concept of which market do I focus on, is reusable content. In the federal space, when I write a response to a RFI, a request for information, or I write a proposal response, the way you write it is almost exactly the same every single time. You might tweak it a little bit to some of the guidance they give you. You certainly will tweak it a little bit to the agency, but basically you can be ensured that there's this 80-20 rule. 80% of what you have will be reusable across the board, and you just tweak 20% in every one. And if you can focus your core competencies down into, let's say, cybersecurity, using risk management framework as an example, then as you go through, risk management framework is everywhere in every single agency. So wherever you go and whatever response you're doing, you could have reusable content going in. But when you go into a commercial business, unless you're doing that exact same thing of trying to keep focus on RMF, then your content will have to change. Your message will have to change depending on what the need of the customer is. And this goes back to this whole idea of visibility. So the salespeople who are out there, they can see every opportunity, right? And this goes into the purchasing process is what I want to go into. Second bullet here, main bullet, is understanding purchasing basics. So in the federal space, I can see all the opportunities. I can see for the last 10 years what has been awarded. I can go research the documentation that came out that was the procurement documentation. I can look at the awards, see who it was awarded to, what the price was, et cetera. And then I can look at new opportunities and see out 5-10 years of what's coming out, whether I'm looking at stated opportunities coming out or opportunities that I know are expiring in the next few years that I will be pursuing because it's a recompete. You can't do that in the commercial market. You know, obviously there's always a one-off exception, but in the commercial market, it's all hidden. There's no big database of, oh, hey, here's our complete transparency of our organization, because by their very nature, they're close hold on that information within the commercial market. They're not trying to broadcast it to the competitors or whatever it is. So it's very hard to find that information. You know, you might try to get into a subscription, but really you're looking at just upcoming opportunities right on the book, not out years and not back years. When you look at the commercial market in any kind of serious way. And the same thing with state and local. You might have some insight in there, but what you have with state and states, right? There's 50 states plus our protectorates. Inside of there, it's a different process for each one. They don't all follow some standard model, but on the federal side, we have a single set of regulations, the FAR. CFR, DFAR, whatever you want to call it, but the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation, says here's the process for succeeding. When I switch to the commercial side, the reason I don't like it is because it's a different set of rules. Many times it's the good old boy system. Who do I know? Did I take the right person to lunch? There's no rules really guiding what they're doing. There's no rules guiding the market research. Whether they choose to use small businesses or not is a business decision, where on the federal side, it's law, right? You will use small businesses. And so there's a lot of activity that go into the regulations and then the process. The process for procurement in the federal government is basically, and I know I'm using this term loosely, the same. It starts with requirements beginning to be discovered, et cetera, going into budgeting, and then going into a formal acquisition approach. That's all defined pretty standard within the federal government across every single buyer. In the commercial side, there is no agreement that we're all going to buy it the exact same way. And so each customer you go into, you've got to learn them and how they do things. Another good example from a process standpoint on the federal side to the commercial is in the federal side, they can look into tools like the dynamic small business search and find you. So a marketing tool that buyers can find you on. They can look in CPARs and FPDS and see the contracts you've been awarded and see your past performance. The information is shared across the board. The people who work in the federal government talk to each other. Does the Department of Education talk to the Navy? Probably not, right? But inside the Navy, they talk to each other. A CIO here talks to a CIO here. In the Department of Veterans Affairs, there's 150 hospitals, give or take. Each hospital has a facility CIO. Those facility CIOs work together in a group of like 8, let's say, in a particular network of hospitals. And then those network CIOs work together in a broader region. And so they talk to each other. And in particular, when there's a company that's doing well, they'll hear about it. Or if you want to sit there and go from one to the other, well, they're friends. They've been working for 10 years together kind of thing. And so you can ask Jane to introduce you to John. And so in there, from a marketing perspective, the ease of marketing, once you learn the system, is there. And I don't see it on the commercial side as much. And by the way, I want to bring this back again. If you choose to be in the commercial, I'm saying go all in. And if you choose to be in federal, I'm saying go all into the federal. The last thing I want to say before I switch over to some tips on how do you do commercial when you're all in on federal, is this idea of teaming partners. You don't see this on commercial, little bit on state and local, right? But don't see this on commercial where there's this huge active network of trying to team up. But in the federal side, first off, it is just a norm of how we do business. We do business in teaming, whether we're small businesses trying to learn and get in, large businesses like Booz Allen and Lockheed will proactively team up with other firms to beat out other large firms, right? So teaming is a normal way of doing business in the federal space. And our ability to find teammates is encouraged both through events like industry days, et cetera, that are perhaps bringing together vendors. And then through tools like the dynamic small business I mentioned, where all the small businesses are listed, or DHS, for example, keeps this great list of large prime contractors in DHS that are open to working with smalls. And so they have points of contact in there. The federal government, all throughout the entire civilian and defense side of it, they encourage larges to work with smalls and smalls to work with larges. And they try to make it easy by providing contact information, et cetera. So there's all these tools available to you in the federal space. Again, if you learn it, you're off to the races. On the commercial side, not so much, right? So I'm going to move in. The last thing I want to leave you with today is the strategic path for success in federal government that includes commercial. I actually do believe in commercial business when you're in federal, but very strategically. What I don't recommend is going after the Walmart type business, let's say, or a local power company or something, and the federal market. They're completely unrelated. What I want you to do is go after related business. I'll tell you about that in 1 second. I just want to look here to see if there's topics. Thanks, Jim. Hey, Jim. We are the best in IT. So we've been trying to focus on users and those technologies through. So Cynthia's talking about getting blocked. I would love to talk with you because this is an example of another topic I want to go into. The whole point of 8A companies is that the government is helping companies like these go through a business development period and growing. I want to hear what you're running into. So one, I can provide you maybe a couple of quick tips on moving past whatever roadblock you're in, but also I can learn about what could I share with others. So Cynthia, let's talk. Okay, so let me give you my recommendation in there. First off, if you haven't heard this before, the way I say that you grow your business in the federal government space is you start off subcontracting to small businesses. And small businesses generally are, let's say, 4 or 5, 6 times your size. I'm just using that as a loose number. But basically, if you're just getting in with no revenue, start with the companies that are 5 to 10 million, right? If you've got a company and you're doing 5 million, then you should be trying to find, obviously, anybody below this range, but you want to find people that are in that $10 to $30 million range, getting close to graduating. These are people who are still small businesses, who know who you are, but now you can go after bigger opportunities that are good for them and good for you, allow you to grow, let's say, $1 million or $2 million a year. And then, so that's subcontracting. Second thing I say is prime, right? First sub with small, second prime with agencies, because now you got past performance in the federal space. Even if it's sub, that's totally okay. You're ready to knock on the doors of an agency. And then third is your large subcontracting. So I've talked about those for getting federal revenue. I don't want to expand too much on that because I want to go into how do you add commercial to it. And I've done this successfully where I've made more than 50% on the commercial dollar from companies that were related to what I'm doing. So let me use an example. Booz Allen was a customer of mine way back when. We served Booz Allen's internal needs, not on a contract. We actually had to come back to them and get on their subcontracts, but we had federal contracts with the VA and other people, but inside of Booz Allen, who is a federal contractor who could put us perhaps on their teams of federal opportunities, it was wise, and this is SharePoint for me, so business process applications, things like that make you run your better business. We were in Booz Allen inside their company, helping their internal CIO build apps in their basically on SharePoint. And so we were getting commercial dollars at commercial rates. Actually, the last company I had, that's the commercial business I used to get my GSA schedule. You need to reference commercial business. But Booz Allen is through and through a federal contractor. They had commercial business back in the day. But so I'm going after a commercial business, but I'm doing it with a business that can grow my federal business as well. Compared to if I went after the VA work and then I went over here and I said, hey, I'm going to do work with this particular hospital system. Well, that hospital system doesn't work with the federal side, so it's a complete stop. It just ends there. And so what I'm suggesting is if you want to be in the commercial space, go there. You can also take this to the next level, and I'm just looking down at my time, so put questions in if you got them. You can also do this at an industry level. So I'm doing it with a company like Booz Allen. I know another company that is in tight with Northrop Grumman. They should be expanding on Northrop Grumman on a federal side because they're in on a commercial side. They can grow both sides of their business, the commercial revenue and the federal revenue, in that same company. And so it's a good long-term strategic customer for this other company I was just talking about. But let's say you're in healthcare, right? You want to be in healthcare. So you're in the federal space, you're like, hey, we're in the federal space, but we also want to be in the health side, health IT, whatever it is. What I would recommend you do is you go find a company like Cerner. Cerner is this company that huge multi-billion-dollar company that came in and landed a $10 billion 10-year contract to convert the electronic health records at the VA, the paper records to electronic, right? And to create electronic health records for the VA. They've got a $10 billion contract. They need to sit there and give 30% of it to small businesses in one way or another, according to their small business plan. So you have this potential to go in there and subcontract with them on federal revenue side. Cerner is much larger in the commercial side. This was one of their big wins. And the reason they were able to come in and do it is because they do so much with healthcare on the outside of the federal government. So being able to get in with Cerner, let's say as a subcontractor, and then building a relationship inside. Hey, how do I meet this person? How do I meet this person? You can then find yourself pulling in revenue from a commercial stream that's all on the outside, but you're doing it with one company. That's, to me, that's a strategic, smart investment of your resources. Your people are building relationships with Cerner, both on the federal and the commercial side. You're able to have this one large company where they're identifying federal opportunities, maybe state and local you can team up with, and commercial, right? So what I don't like is when we don't focus, or I said it in the beginning, we dilute our focus. So I'm looking over here and I'm looking over here. If I tried to do what I just described with Cerner on my own as a small business under $10 million, let's say, then I would be chasing this event here. I'd be preparing material for a state and local type way, or I'd prepare material for a commercial briefing or something, then come right back around and go, the federal side is very conservative. The commercial side is very cutting edge. They just naturally are the way they are. So you might see them more on Facebook, let's say, where the federal side, much more on LinkedIn, if they're on social media at all, kind of thing. How you talk to them, how you interact is different. You can go to lunch with the commercial one, no problem at all. Do whatever you want. On the federal side, people take offense nowadays that you might suggest buying anything more than a cup of coffee with them because it's their job. They could go to jail if they sit there and take money from vendors. And so having a small business person, a salesperson, a marketing person, or a business owner bounce back and forth between these different ways of doing things, that's why I argue focus, because eventually you can get big enough to do something. But really, when you're under 50 million, I say 10 million, but I'll say 50 million, focus. If you want federal growth, you can get it. If you want high profit margins, you can get it. And if you want commercial success, you can get it through these companies like all these $10 billion firms, multi-billion dollar firms. So even Microsoft, go team up with Microsoft on the Fed side and then slide right around and help them with their commercial or international customers, right? Same thing with Lockheed Martin or Boeing or Booz Allen, any of these firms, Accenture. It doesn't matter what your business is. You can probably go high enough where you will find that there's these teaming partners that you can create a good relationship with that will lead to federal and commercial revenue and allow you to focus better. So I'm going to pause there, look really quick, see if I see any questions. How do you get into expiring contracts with food and beverage? So the question is, how do you get into expiring contracts? Forget about with food and beverage because it's all the same. If you're looking at identifying opportunities that are expiring in whatever you sell, just go to FPDS. You can go to SAM too, but go to FPDS and in fpds.gov, go in there and search for your NAICS code or your food type. I was searching this morning on elevators with somebody else, and I realized it's actually called vertical transportation. I was like, but go into FPDS, search on that, and set an expiration of, let's say, next year, 2023. And that means if it's expiring next year, they're probably thinking about how are they going to do it. And so food and beverages, they're going to be thinking 6 months out, 12 months out of, yes, we're going to recompete this. You just want to identify in FPDS what's expiring. Make sure you focus on one agency, especially early on, below 10 million, one agency, and just dive deep in there. So Ivory, what a coincidence. That's exactly how we didn't work for the same company, did we, Ivory? No. So it's great looking at Ivory. She's saying that she ran through that same example, right? Is starting with a large and then moving out into the federal space. So I'm just looking one last time up here. Great, Cynthia. Thanks. Reach out, definitely. Okay, I don't see any other questions there. I just want to restate what I said here for 1 second is that I love the dollars that come from commercial business, and I love working on commercial projects sometimes. What I don't like is the delusion of I think it's delusion of my focus. And I think I'm getting a little of it right now, but of my focus, of my salespeople, of my marketing team, of all that stuff. I want to be focused either on this or on that. I don't care which, but I want to be all in on one. And a way to keep with the commercial, if you're all in on federal, like I'm suggesting, is have teaming partners that are large, multi-billion-dollar companies that have a good commercial presence, and you will be able to grow your commercial business as well. So I hope you see my rationale on that and understand the reasoning that I believe, you should be kind of all in on federal when you say you're in federal. If you found value on this topic today, give it a thumbs up and or leave a comment. I always love seeing those afterwards. If you want to learn how to start and build relationships that lead to federal dollars and federal revenue, attend my webinar, not next week, but I think the week after on May 3rd, whenever that is. You can register on govconchamber.com. Remember, government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. I'll see you next time.